Shabbat Shalom, Mr. Kai.
Shabbat Shalom.
As always, it's a pleasure seeing everybody here today, and be the Father's will, we're going to try to have another dynamic lesson. The Zodiac and the Father's salvation plan. I'm going to have it written down. So the Zodiac and the Father's salvation plan. So we're going to continue on from there, and I'm going to try to do it with a little bit more clarity so everybody can understand exactly what's going on here, because the festivals are very, very important. It's our salvation plan. So it's very important for us to understand the Father's salvation plan. And anybody have any testimonies? How's your couple of days been going so far? I know Zakai, he had to do a whole lot of working yesterday, so pray for everything is good at the home front. All right, hallelujah. Okay, then without further ado, we'll go ahead and get the class started. We have our chief elder, Gabar Yahu, to blow the shofar 7 times, and then after that, we go ahead and get the class started. All right, Mr. Khan, let's go. Hallelujah.
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 Okay, Mr. McCall, what we're going to be doing is just briefly talking about a little bit on what happened on our observance of Pesach. First, we talked about there were other mighty ones. All right, but there's only one mighty one, which is the Father's Son, Yashra'al HaMashiach, which is firstborn. We talked about how of the division of lots, that the Father actually gave the nation of Yashra'al a mighty one, which is Yashra'al HaMashiach. We talked about the calendar a little bit. We talked about the ecliptic, the way that the sun moves in its patterns, and it goes through deacons, it goes through constellations, and we try to get some clarity on that. So what we want to do is pretty much kind of springboard off of that there to make sure that everybody has a good understanding. The constellations, again, Mr. McCall, are very, very, it is easy once we, it's something that you would have to look at a couple of times, but it's really not as difficult the way that it looks. But what I want to first do is let's go to the book of Bereshit first. There's something I wanted to bring to the congregation's attention. It's in regards to other mighty ones. When you go to the book of Bereshit, the 2nd chapter, verse, I'm going to first go with I'm going to start at verse 2. And I'm only going to touch on it because I don't want to go too far off to another lesson. No, verse 10. This said, we have, this is Bereshit, the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 10. I'm going to read down a little bit. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden. And from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pison, that is which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of the land there is good. When I first read that, it really kind of sparked my interest here a little bit. So we're talking about a particular location, and it made mention that the gold in that particular place was good. So if there's good gold, then there's also gold that is not as good. And so you would have to ask yourself, why is Scripture mentioning here about this particular stone? Okay, let's use it that way, that this particular stone. So what is actually going on here when it's talking about that gold in this particular part of the land is real good?
Purified.
Huh?
Purified.
Purified? Right, yeah. For example, there's a place in Africa which was known in prior times called Abzu, A-B-Z-U. And it made mention of a lot of mining being done in that particular location. And so what scientists have been trying to do for the longest is to figure out why was there so much mining done in this part of Africa. And then we have in Genesis, the second chapter, verse 17, and it says, and the Father took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Now the word keep means to guard, and it means to protect. So if Adam was placed in the garden and the Father's asking him to protect the garden, the question should be now, who is Adam protecting the garden from? So this is the way that I read. I mean, in all sincerity, you ask these questions, you do your research so you can try to come up with the best answer possible so that you can try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, I believe everybody understands that there were other people on the planet Earth outside of Adam. And so we have now the Father taking Adam, placing him in the garden. We have a mineral that's being talked about in Scripture where it talks about gold, and gold being good, placing Adam in, not in Eden, but in the garden, and his job was to actually protect the garden. So I'm just trying to let everybody know that there's other beings, there's other, he's not the only one there, but he's in a secluded place from everybody else. And so the Father now is beginning to have this relationship with this one particular person, and this one particular person is going to be the father of a whole lot of other people, and then he's going to break it down where he's actually showing us that he's dealing with the nation of Yashra'al. I just wanted to touch on that just a little bit. Now, here we go. I'm going to be reading some history here because history is going to be very important for us to also connect with Scripture. So I'm going to read down a little bit, and then I'm going to have Zakane to actually prove everything that I'm reading here with Scripture. Now, the solar calendar, all right? The solar calendar, that is very important that we understand how we used to keep time. It was a solar calendar, not a lunar calendar. But the solar calendar is shown in the first book of Enoch. It was given by the angel or the messenger Uriel. And the original priestly calendar that was used in the Torah. The solar calendar is a 12-month solar calendar having 364 days only. 364 days. It was used by the antediluvian patriarchs by Noah, Abraham, and Jacob. It was taught to Moses by the angel Yahuwah, or the messenger. This is, I'll just say the messenger. And it continued in effect throughout the Second Temple period under Ezra and Nehemiah. This verse gets very, very interesting because I had a conversation with a brother not too long ago, but it just went somewhere else. But when we began to follow the history, especially the book of the Maccabees, it was the official Hebrew calendar until the 2nd century BCE, when King Antiochus, all right, Epiphanes, ended the use of the solar calendar and forced, okay, he forced the people of Israel to observe a lunar calendar. This is Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. Zacchaeus, if you was to go to the book of Maccabees, the first chapter. Because identity is also very important, and we need to know who our enemies are and who was it that actually began this mass corruption that we to this day follow. And this is the reason why there's so many different calendars out there, and we need to try to make heads of all of this here.
So you want the first or second?
One second here. We're going to go to the first Maccabees.
First Maccabees.
The first chapter, verse 11. Let's start with verse 10. 10, 11, 12, and 13.
First Maccabees 1, verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks.
So he was a Greek, all right?
In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we've departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein, that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen.
And this is what we're actually seeing today with a lot of the so-called holidays that are coming around, especially like right now we have Easter that's coming up tomorrow. And so what happened now was that when Antiochus Epiphanes and these Greeks came into play, it even talks about how evils began to multiply once the Greeks came into power. And it's very important that we begin to really examine who is the enemy in these last days here. It's not a racial thing. Everybody knows who the Greeks are. Yeah. All right, so it's very important that we identify who the enemy is. If we can identify who the enemy is, we should be able to move forward and understand exactly what's going on. So again, history is extremely important. And this is the reason why a lot of people don't even want to like dealing with the book of the Maccabees, because it talks about a lot of history amongst our people. Now, the new moon calendar was the official calendar of the Greeks. And when Alexander the Great, or the Freak, conquered the Middle East in the 4th century BCE, the lunar calendar was introduced and was gradually accepted by most of the people, except for the Hebrews. In 172 BCE, King Antiochus appointed a Hebrew now. His name was Melius, spelled Menelaus, as Jerusalem's high priest, to introduce the Greek way of educating the young people and to completely Hellenize the Hebrew people. He also sent a senator from Athens to give the Hebrew people an ultimatum to forsake the laws of the father Abiahor and follow the king's orders, or to be put to death. So most of the Hebrew people followed the king's orders to save their families, and many were put to death. King Antiochus forced the Hebrew people to celebrate the birthday of the month, every month at the time of the moon's first visibility. So we have the conjunction moon, the dark moon, every single month. And we see this not happening what they call the Hillel calendar. At the first crescent of the moon, it was the Greeks, it was Antiochus Epiphanes who changed the calendar from a solar calendar to a lunar calendar. And when you see the first crescent, they said that this is going to now be the first day of the month. And if you didn't apply or do everything that the Greeks wanted us to do, we were simply put to death. All right, so I just